I did really have a strong feeling at the time too that Nashville was going to be a really strong real estate market. I don't think I would have said that it would be ULI's top market in the world for 3 years in a row, and that companies such as Oracle and Facebook and Amazon would start setting up world headquarters and things like that here. But I did feel like it had the opportunities of an Austin or like an Atlanta 20 years ago to really become, for lack of better terms, one of the next hit cities. And luckily that really played out, and we got here just in time to really take advantage of, whilst things were still more affordable here compared to the entire United States, it's still very affordable here. But even in the 8 years we've been here, things have doubled, especially in the city we live in. Amazon dropped a massive facility and everything's just changed.
Welcome to the Cashflow Fight Club podcast. In the Champions Corner edition, I'm Mike Deaton, and together with Ligia, my co-host in life, business, and this podcast, we're taking you into the training room, deep in the dojo, sharing the secrets of what it takes to forge a champion. We're digging deep into mindset mastery, high-performance habits, best-in-class behaviors, and bringing you the tips and techniques that maximize human potential, brought to you from some of the best in the business.
So grab your buds and your seat. Hit subscribe and get ready to up your game. Let's do the show.
Let's do it. Today on the Cashflow Fight Club podcast, we are excited to sit down with Brian Heller, a true pro at turning real estate into long-term wealth.
Brian's story is unique. He began his career producing hit reality shows like Survivors and The Bachelor, but in 2010, he pivoted into real estate. Since then, he's achieved over 300 million in transactions, focusing on multifamily properties with a value-add strategy that's made him a sought-after expert in the field.
In this episode, Brian shares his journey from Hollywood, California to Nashville, diving into how he's built a portfolio that generates passive income, particularly for busy professionals like you. We'll also cover his take on the evolving real estate market and his approach to finding opportunities even in a tough environment.
We're talking fundamentals too, like picking the right markets, using fixed rate financing, and building a reliable management team. Brian also opens up about the role of mentors and his commitment to helping others build generational wealth through real estate.
So come join us as we explore Brian's journey, his insights on the current market, and his tips for creating financial freedom with smart real estate moves.
Let's get into it with Brian Heller on the Cashflow Fight Club podcast.
Brian Heller, thanks for joining us on the podcast today. We're excited to dig into your background and talk real estate.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Well, you bet.
Why don't we just kick off with a little bit about your background, pre-real estate, and what got you into real estate? Absolutely, yeah. So I'm born and raised in California, and I grew up in the Bay Area. I ultimately moved to Los Angeles to go to USC, where I ultimately studied cinema television at the top film school in the world, and enjoyed working in entertainment for about 10 years. As you can see here, I got my Survivor torch behind me. I worked on a number of reality shows, including 5 seasons of Survivor, some on location and some in Los Angeles and more the post-production side of things. But working in entertainment was great in my 20s, got some fantastic opportunities, once in a lifetime opportunities to live in other countries, traveled to a ton of US states as a result of working in the industry. But ultimately, after some time and a lot of travel and missing friends' weddings and things like that, I just realized that I never really felt like I was building anything. And ultimately, ironically, hit rock bottom, March of 2010, I decided to get into real estate. And I started off in Los Angeles as an apartment broker, where I ultimately did about 200 million in transactions, sold almost 800 units, obviously in one of the most sought after and competitive markets in the world. And again, really great experience. I was also an on-site manager for one of my clients, really great opportunity to learn asset management, see value add investing firsthand, really get to touch and feel what it's like to be day to day in the weeds as an apartment operator, so to speak. And so we did that for about 6 years. And then ultimately I decided that I wanted to get more onto the principal or ownership side of real estate. And obviously Los Angeles is also one of the most expensive markets in the world. And And so decided that if it was going to be best to ultimately pursue being on the investment side of things in a more favorable market, not only in terms of landlord friendly states and just in terms of the price per unit or the ability to enter the marketplace. And so I moved to Nashville about 8 years ago. And since moving to Nashville, I've done everything from building houses to getting land entitled to full cycle syndications and also being the asset manager for and starting the market here in Nashville for one of the large iBuyers. But ultimately, I have most recently started my new company, Fairway Equities, and we are focused on helping busy professionals to build generational wealth and find a life of financial freedom by passively investing in apartment building investments. And so that's really where my passion and my expertise lies is in the apartment and multifamily space. And I'm really trying to help others to build wealth for their families by using real estate, similar to the way that I have, and with the understanding of how difficult it can be if you're in an industry like entertainment or an entrepreneur or just a busy professional where you don't have the time to source the deals and to be a landlord and to deal with the tenants, termites, and toilets. That's where we come into play. We do all the heavy lifting for you, and you just get to sit back, relax, and collect distribution checks and get all the tax advantages and everything of being a real estate investor while not having to deal with any of the headaches of being a landlord. But something that not a lot of people know about. I do my best to educate the masses, as they say, and really try and help people understand the power of real estate. 90% of all millionaires have done so through owning real estate. And I think it's a really important owning real estate. I think is something that's really important to anyone's investment portfolio.
That's a fantastic investment class, and we share your sentiment. We've done our fair share of multifamily syndications and other real estate projects, but specifically in that world, when you're exposing it to other people, there is a strong educational component because it's definitely gaining in understood. It is, I guess, it's reaching more people, but I also think sometimes that we are operating inside of an ecosystem that feels like it may be more prevalent than it really is. So I know when we started, it took us a while to really find investors, take the time to educate them. We're talking months or more than a year to get people what exactly this is and comfortable with how the deals work and even able to liberate some funds to be able to put in them, because a lot of people have their funds locked up in 401ks, right? And so there's movements that can be made to make those more flexible than just your Fidelity or your typical brokerage thing. But yeah, education is definitely a big component. I love to hear that you're focused on that and getting things going. I'd love to rewind a little bit to some old television terminology there, but just back in your pre-real estate days and talk about, gosh, going to USC, getting into the world of entertainment. That must have been fun. Were you a single guy at the time when you were enjoying all those, or do you have a?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, but if you want to hear a real funny story is actually when I got offered the job for Survivor, it was right like a week or so after now wife and I had decided to move in together. And basically I finally got offered the job of a lifetime and was going to be gone for 6 months. And so I'm sure you can imagine that was a fun conversation. But
Yeah.
no, yeah, we were actually together for most of the time. I was in the entertainment industry, but so many, like I said, fun and great experiences. But the travel and the hours and all that is also what really wears on you and gets you burnt out. And so you have no control over your schedule and all that stuff. So while there's a lot of fun, and I think in your 20s, it's great. I can't imagine. Look, I by no means am I old. I'm 44 now, but I really can't imagine doing all that travel and working those hours and just not having the control or the ability to come home and see my daughter every day and all that good stuff. So I'm very glad with the decision that I made, but I'm also glad to have had and grateful to have had the opportunities when I was younger to do some really cool things like blowing up mountains and going in helicopters. And
Were those in the early season days? Like
so blowing up the mountain wasn't Survivor. That was on a show called Worst Case Scenario. And we had these things called volunteer challenges. And so we took people, if they had like a video recorded sort of accident or something that happened. So there were these guys that had an avalanche happen on them in Bozeman, Montana. And so we took them back in the Washington mountains and taught them avalanche safety. But to do so, we set an avalanche, a dummy with an avalanche beacon in the middle of the mountain, blew up the mountain, set off the avalanche, and then showed how you can go and find him if everyone has an avalanche beacon and things like that. But
Okay.
again, not something that most people get to say that they've even remotely done. Who else calls a park ranger and says, "Hey, do you got some explosives? Can you help us blow up the side of the mountain so we can help educate people on what to do if they find themselves stuck in an avalanche?" Tons of other things like that, but that's probably the most exciting one to talk about.
That's funny. I actually really love what you said a little bit earlier, because I would imagine that your life was back then full of adventure. Financially was probably very lucrative for you as well. And you traveled to those places where most people don't get the opportunity to travel to. But you've decided to pivot your life and align your lifestyle to your own values, which I think it's a very important thing to do.
Yeah, we share that. I also found myself in more of a corporate career, but in the, I guess, 2010 to 2016, I had a regional role working on a global team in a big Microsoft, big tech company, and it was travel every month. And most of the time, that was half of the month. And we'd leave on Sunday evening or whatever and come back Friday evening. And Ligia and I were together at the time, and it was not very rewarding. Okay, financially, yes, there were great perks in all of that, but just wasn't what we wanted out of our lives. And we also pivoted into real estate, which I love. But yeah, maybe talk about that. Like, you got into real estate. Was there some overlap, like a parallel path for a bit, or was it a clean cut for you in terms of leaving that and transitioning?
It was pretty clean cut, mostly because another hard part about what the entertainment industry does is when you're not on the corporate side of entertainment, when you're on the production side, which is where I was, what's on again, off again. When you have a show, you're on. When that show's done, you're off. You're looking for your next show, or you're waiting for that show to come back around again. And so it actually started, it was a time where the industry was slowing down. There wasn't a lot of shows. And like I said, I reflected back on the time that I had spent on it. And you mentioned being in the corporate world, where at least the good part about the corporate world, right? You get benefits, you get 401k, you get matching, you get things like that, right? In entertainment, you don't get any of that. And so part of how this all started is I I know how hard it is to plan for retirement or come up with your financial planning and stuff on your own. And as a result of not having these things set up for you. And I wanted to, I started out getting into real estate, obviously just for myself and for a different career. But once I saw the powers and saw my wealth grow as a result of the investments and stuff that I was making, I knew that this was something that I really wanted to help other people to do as well. But going back to the beginning there, yeah, I had a friend who had similarly transitioned. He was more on the corporate side of real estate, working in like the agency world, but similar bad experiences, just working for some pretty difficult bosses and situations, like the horror stories that we all hear about. And he was headed on a very successful path, but he ultimately decided to get out of that, go to law school, and then got into real estate. And we were obviously talking, as we do quite often. And he was like, there's so many parallels between what you're doing in the entertainment industry and real estate. Why don't you give it a try? And like I said, I started off in brokerage, and there were about 5 people that started off at the boutique brokerage that I started off at. And by the end of a year, I was the only one who had made it, the only one who had closed a deal, and the only
Wow.
one who ultimately eventually continued in commercial real estate. Like I said, as mentioned, this is 2010. 2010 was almost
Cool.
like this year or even last year. Very few deals, very
Yeah.
hard to get financing, a lot of fear in the marketplace, right? But for those who did deals or even over the next coming years, 2011, 12, 13, they were all very rewarded very well. Overall, I'm very happy with that decision and that transition. And like I said, ultimately brokerage served to be the launching point to so many other facets of the real estate industry for me.
Yeah, it's a great way to learn. I haven't done it, but I've worked with several on some of our commercial deals, and they get in the weeds, right? They understand, they help sellers create the sales packages. And so they do that. There's obviously a team in a brokerage firm, but there are people digging into the financials of a property, the health, how to position it, that you could position it to potential buyers, feeding information on what type of value add can be done, how you can increase operating income. And so I can imagine that is a very rich environment to get some hands-on education and certainly help you today where you are.
Yeah, no, 100%. I would recommend anyone to start off in brokerage, right? You're going to need to know how to underwrite. You're going to need to know how to read comps. You're going to need to understand the different business plans and how somebody might execute on this property in order to make it a fruitful investment. And by being in brokerage, you really get the basics all the way to some more advanced ways of really learning and understanding the multifamily industry, but obviously you can do brokerage and a number of different things. But I would say as much as I focused on multifamily, you do get exposure by, like I said, being at the brokerage to people who are working in other areas of commercials. I have a pretty good understanding of everything from industrial to office to triple net. I just choose to specialize in apartments because at the end of the day, everybody needs a place to live. And that's the market and the investment class that I prefer.
Yeah, we got in for a similar reason. I think it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were looking to expand into commercial real estate, and there wasn't really a clear direction that said, this is the best asset class or that's the best asset class. And we also chose to get into multifamily for those reasons, right? It's housing. People need housing. There's a big supply gap that is not going to close, at least in the next 5 years or so. You're also providing a service to people beyond, obviously, office space and retail that provides a service as well, but just not a direct tangible service. But it is a difficult asset class because of exactly those reasons. You are providing housing for people and there's a lot of regulation. There's a lot of responsibility. You're dealing with people in their lives, in their homes. And so it does bring about challenges, which we can talk about here in just a bit. But I forget when you said you moved from LA to Nashville. It was
eight, so like
Yeah.
2017, 2018-ish. Yeah.
And was that real estate driven or just quality of life? A little bit of all of it, or?
Yeah, it started with lower cost of living, better quality of life. My
Yeah.
wife and I wanted to get out of Los Angeles for a while, but most of the areas that we knew people were New York, Seattle, San Francisco, and that didn't really change the dynamic of lower cost of living. They're probably just named outside of Miami and Chicago, the most expensive places in the country to
Right.
live. In essence, we had some friends here and my wife had some family and stuff too. But in essence, we were here one time on a trip and just saw, oh, wow, here we could afford a house. I did really have a strong feeling at the time too, that Nashville was going to be a really strong real estate market. I don't think I would have said that it would be ULI's top market in the world for 3 years in a row. And that companies such as Oracle and Facebook and Amazon would start setting up world headquarters and things like that here. But I did feel like it had the opportunities of an Austin or like an Atlanta 20 years ago to really become, for lack of better terms, one of the next it cities. And luckily that really played out. And we got here just in time to really take advantage of, whilst things were still more affordable here, look, compared to the entire United States, it's still very affordable here. But even in the 8 years we've been here, things have doubled, especially in the city we live in. Amazon dropped a massive facility and everything's just changed overnight. When you couple that, like I said, with the other changes going on downtown and everything, it's been great. But yeah, lower cost of living, better quality of life, opportunity to get onto the principal side of things. Those were the main reasons why we moved here, and we've achieved all of those, and very glad with the decision that we made. We miss out on a little bit of diversity and some food things that you maybe can't get in California per se, but truthfully, again, if you want the food and the culture here has 10x'd as much as the real estate values have, and that needing to be on the coasts now post COVID is something that's changed quite a bit. And I think Nashville has a very bright future, and certainly glad to be here raising a family versus trying to do it in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I grew up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and cost of living is one of the best, even though it continues to go up. But you've touched on some things. The growth in the U.S. in a lot of these areas has just been phenomenal in the last 10 years or so. These places like Nashville and Austin, you mentioned, and some of these places that might have even been considered a tertiary type market have just blossomed. We live close to Colorado Springs here. We're in a small town, but we're 30 minutes away. And even the growth there is just tremendous. It's really been a fantastic time to be, and if you're positioned well in some of these what were smaller cities, which are by no means small now. Yeah, the cultural diversity, the food, all of that has really, it knows no geographical limits much anymore. So you touched on the fact that I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you moved to Nashville. You also listed several other, let's just call them real estate ventures that you had explored. Were those in Nashville? So you mentioned doing land entitlement, some single family and things like that. Was that in the Nashville area?
Yeah, that was all here in Nashville. So when I first moved here, I was building houses. It was at the time really popular and still is, but it's getting harder and harder to find. There used to be a lot of lots that were very easily achievable. And then over the last 8 years, plenty of developers and investors like myself have come in and developed a lot of the easy properties. So now the opportunities you're finding are a little bit more difficult or getting a little bit further out from the center of town. Or if you want to develop in the center of town, they exist, but it's proving pretty difficult for the numbers to pencil because between the land prices and the financing and all that stuff, it's pretty expensive. But then, yeah, we also entitled a piece of land that we ultimately sold to one of the largest home builders in the country. And at this point, that was already 3 or 4 years ago. So they have built all the homes, and I think it's entirely sold out. I think they might have bought another piece of land, and what was originally supposed to be 200 or 300 units might be growing, but the piece of land that we sold them is definitely built out at this point. And yeah, and then like I said, I was also an asset manager for one of the large iBuyers, but their model has proven to not be very effective, and they've since closed their Nashville offices, and they may have a few offices still going, but in light of the rising interest rate environment, they're not too strong these days. So
yeah,
gone
you
from that
mentioned
a
this.
while
That's
ago.
the second time I've heard you mention this term iBuyer. I'm not familiar with that. Is that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Basically, the iBuyers, they go in and buy, renovate, and resell homes within, call it, 90 days. So they do everything from selling to the large institutional investors like your America's Home for Rent and of the world to basically that when you see like someone that'll write you a cash offer and then like I said, that will go in and they'll give you a guaranteed offer, or whatever, or cash offer, and then we buy the house and then we make the improvements and then we put it back on the market very quickly.
Okay. Okay.
But like I said, when you and I are okay, if you and I were going to do an investment, we'd probably want to make $100,000 on one investment. Their model was more volume based, and they were okay making $1,000 on 100 investments, and it worked great. The time period that I was there, it was for the most part, it was fantastic. We hit generational real estate opportunity, and things were going really good. But as soon as things started to go south, when prices start to fall, that model doesn't work very well.
Yeah. Yeah. You definitely have to catch it on the upswing. You've mentioned a couple times now, we in your phraseology. So you now, I guess, have I don't know how old your company is, but do you have some partners in a formal business arrangement?
No. So Fairway Equities is just myself. I guess what I would say is, and again, I'll say we, is what Fairway Equities does, or we partner with. So sometimes it's our deal, but even then we might bring in other partners, whether it's for balance sheets, like a key principal, or for other investors, or potentially someone with boots on the ground or something like that. But what I've done is, so I cover Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, a little bit into Kentucky, Alabama, and like Georgia and Atlanta, with the main focus on Tennessee, because those are the areas that I can reach with boots on the ground. But then so that my investors have access to other projects, I have some strategic groups and operators that I know and trust, and many of them I've invested with myself, so that I can speak very highly of them and know how they're going to operate for my investors. But what it does is it allows us to geographically enter more markets. I work with a group out of Denver. I've got a deal in Phoenix right now that I just took out today, and some groups in Dallas, Texas, or really all of the Texas markets, and then Savannah, Georgia area, and Atlanta. So in essence, it helps me to work with other like-minded people to bring the best possible investment opportunities to our investors.
Got it. Okay. That's clear. How are you going about finding and forming your partnerships? Are you in certain networking groups, or just floating around in the industry, so to speak?
Yeah, and obviously I go to a lot of networking events and
Mhm.
things like that, but I am a member of the Jake and Gino community, and a
Okay.
number of the people who I am partnering with are the result of the relationships forged from
Yeah.
that and from having spent a good amount of time and stuff together. And like I said, investing in some of their deals and opportunities like that, and hearing people regularly speak and present on other opportunities and things like that. You can really see the cream rise to the top. And then I do a lot of monthly calls with operators so that we're really forging strong relationships and making sure that we're working with top and class operators around the country.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. Those networking groups and communities are great for exactly that purpose, being able to see who's who and understand a lot of that. Jake and Gino, so I'll ask about you, but my understanding of their group is it focuses on maybe not exclusively, but a certain asset size, smaller, less than 100 type unit properties. Is that where your focus
Mhm.
is, or am I incorrect in my assumption there? Or?
I think maybe where you're getting that is they're known for a strategy of trying to find deals from mom and pop investors, and
Uh-huh.
their personal strategy is more of the joint venture strategy. And so that does lend itself better to
Hmm.
some smaller deals. It's hard to JV a $10 million deal, right? Unless you got a lot of big players. But if you want to go JV a smaller deal in the Midwest or something, then it's an easier way for, I think, a lot of people to get started. And while I'm totally open to JVs, I prefer more of the syndication model, partly because I'm doing real estate full time. And that's the way for me to get a promote, to pay the bills, and to create a life with real estate right outside of commercial brokerage. And it also allows me to bring these opportunities and to help other people build wealth through real estate. That's what I like to do. But yeah, maybe that's why you think that about Jake and Gino. But no, I will say this. Yes, I do want to fly underneath the institutional radar, and that I'm really not going after 400 and 600 unit deals in general. But there's plenty of things that you could argue are institution or are close. And again, it just depends on the market, right? So Nashville is already a market where the average price per unit's probably somewhere between, right now it's closer to 150, but like when we sold our deal, we sold it at 200 a door. Again, if you want to go get 100 units, you're talking about a $20 million there pretty quickly. But then there's plenty of cities and opportunities in areas of the Midwest or tertiary cities where people are still getting units for, call it 75,000 a door, right? So you could get almost twice as many units. My strategy and my focus is, I say B and C class, but really I tend to stay more C plus and better. And if I'm going to do a C plus, I like to be in a B or B plus kind of an area. I've just really found that the further and further you get down the scale, you can have real collection issues, you can have crime issues, and there's plenty of value to be unlocked in a B, and playing in that space, buying a B minus and taking it to a B plus, or like I said, taking a C plus and taking it to a B plus. That's really where I like to be, pun intended. I like the deals to be right down the fairway.
Right.
I like to be really 25 to 100 or 25 to 200 units. Like I said, depending on the market is ideal. Somewhere between that 5 and 20 million creates an opportunity to unlock enough value to make the deals attractive to investors and myself, and to really create some great opportunities for everyone.
I am very curious, Brian, to ask you how, or to hear from you, how do you see the market conditions? It's probably fair to say that a lot of operators and investors have been sitting on the sidelines because lately the lending conditions were not very favorable. And people, I'm sure you speak with many potential investors, and I'm curious to hear from you. How do you see the market conditions, and where are some of the investors' fears and hopes in moving forward?
Yeah, no, great question. I'm of the belief that I'm not going to try and call market bottom or anything like that. But if you're talking about market cycles, I would say that we're a lot closer to the bottom than we are to a top. And even with the run up in real estate prices over the last decade, I think that due to the financing and everything over the last couple of years, there's been an opportunity and rising expenses like insurance and property taxes and just everything, electricity, everything's more expensive now. So I think that right now reminds me a lot of 2011, 2012. I think if you can find opportunities right now that aren't negative levered, that are in high growth markets and use realistic rent projections and the deals make sense, I think you'll do very well. I think what a lot of people need to recognize, or maybe already have, but I think the important factors to investing over the next several years is going to be historically interest rates have been around 6%. So that means that the deals and the pricing need to get back in line with that, meaning we can't be buying 3 and 4 caps anymore. You need to be, obviously, if you're in A+ market, it still might be getting into the low 5s, but historically Nashville was probably like a 7 or an 8. Now I'd say it's probably like a 6 cap, but I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think, as you mentioned, that we've been underbuilding housing for a while. The delta between renting and owning has never been larger. There's just, I think that a hurricane's about to hit, right? God only knows how that could affect insurance, but I think eventually, and they already have, is that some of those increases will hit the areas that it affects more drastically as opposed to hitting everybody. But I think that if you plant the seed, you got to remember real estate is a long-term investment. I think so many people got so used to, oh, we can just flip it and 1 year, 2 year, I'm making all this money. This is great. But in general, interest rates have been 6%. A real estate hold period for a deal has been 5 to 7 years, maybe even 5 to 10 years, depending on what you're trying to do. And so I think if you get back to those fundamentals and you get back to that understanding, then I think you're going to be very happy. And I think that there's a lot of great opportunities. And I do think that multifamily and arguably industrial are probably the best places to be. They're also the most competitive. Obviously, if you're an expert in office and you can go and find something that's a great deal, I do think that at some point here, people will start to be called back to the office. And you're already seeing it with Amazon and things like that. But there's a lot more risk in that play, right? Versus when you start to talk about apartments. And I think you want someone that's really well versed in that space. Whereas with multifamily, I think that if you're investing in some of the top 20 markets in the country, in landlord friendly states, in business friendly states, in areas with growing populations, with high renter demand, with high job growth, potentially with some large infrastructure projects like a new stadium or a train or something in an area where a new microchip plant, like you're seeing a lot of in Phoenix or in Texas. The 2 deals that I'm working on right now, both of them to some degree center around those markets because of the chip companies coming in and the amount of jobs that they're going to drop. These are 10, 20, $30 billion projects that are creating thousands of jobs. And what happens is when that drops, then something else drops and it creates this chain effect. And so if you can ride that wave, there's going to be a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunity in these cities, and they're going to need housing, and they're going to need, many developers are building just the newer Class A stuff. So if you can go in and buy the Class B stuff, or like I said, maybe some of the Class C, there's going to be a need for affordable housing. I think I just read today too, there's a ton of the LIHTC, the stuff that was guaranteed to be affordable. A bunch of that is expiring. The affordable housing crisis isn't going away. So if we can offer tenants a clean, safe, and affordable place to live, I think over the next decade, I said, if you can plant those seeds now, I think you're going to do very well.
I tend to agree with you. There's definitely been some hard lessons learned over the last 2-3 years with the interest rate run up, the record interest rate run up. A lot of people got maybe out over their skis in terms of buying into properties that weren't cash flowing. And there was the promise of cash going into a deal where the value add was going to bring the cash flow. And then there was a lot of turbulence.
You have to buy on actuals. You got to use fixed rate debt if you can. You got to use accurate rent projections, right? And you got to have a solid exit cap rate in your projections. All these deals where I hear people went bad, it's almost always floating rate debt. They bought it a 3 cap. They had 10% rent growth expectations. Those are all just not realistic and show that they probably haven't experienced a down cycle, right? Real estate's really easy, like I said, when it's going up. You really find out who knows what they're doing when it starts to adjust and if their business plan was executed well. And even like ours, right, on the deal that we went full cycle, we bought the deal and 5 months later, COVID hit. And so it exponentially changed our plan. But we were able to pivot and did just fine. We never really missed any rent payments. We never missed any distributions to our investors and still came out with an incredibly profitable investment. You just really have to understand all the different levers and ways that you might have to pivot. And obviously also if you can, anticipate some of those things up front, that's great. But I don't think anyone could have anticipated a global pandemic. That was a little bit different.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
some of these issues that people are finding right now and finding themselves in trouble that unfortunately are giving us indicators a little bit of a bad name. A lot of that was just like, I can do anything and I'm untouchable and I'm just going to go do X, Y, and Z and it's all going to work out. And when I hear a lot of these stories, it's pretty obvious to me that they were doomed from day one.
Yeah, it's definitely, I won't say a classic bubble, but it's this kind of bubble phenomenon where any operator was having success. To your point, 12, 24 months, doubling your money. We even got into deals where we had other people bringing investors and the expectation was there. It was like, okay, these are unrealistic expectations. Could happen. That's not, that shouldn't be the bar that we're all setting. And yeah, there's a lot of lessons that hopefully get applied going forward. How are you working with your investors on that? Are you educating to that level where you're talking about the debt structure of the deal? And for us, one of the biggest takeaways that we've seen is the importance of the asset manager and the property manager and how they're able to execute the business plan, because that's no matter your business plan, if you don't have the right people executing on keeping a certain level of occupancy, maintenance, even some of those other aspects, a deal's going to go sideways or negative. Those fundamental elements aren't in place.
That goes back to the we that you asked about earlier, right?
Yeah.
So these teams that we put together are a combination of all those things. We always want to have boots on the ground. We always want to have strong asset management. And that, granted, that is an area that I'm very strong in, but as the deals get larger and larger, sometimes you need multiple eyes, or maybe want someone handling the construction side of things, somebody maybe handling tenant relations and any vacancy issues or things like that. As we all know, there are some really good management companies out there and there are some really bad management companies out there. And no matter how hard you vet them, unfortunately, a lot of times you don't really know until you get into the deal, or sometimes it's just bad timing or it doesn't really work. Maybe they're overwhelmed at the time that you hired them, or who knows. But yeah, sorry, I forgot that.
No, I was just talking about
I had some dust fly into the screen here.
No, it was just really getting down to the investor level and sharing that level of detail with people, because exactly to your point, even property management as a company, it can be property to property, right? They can, I know at least I would say in 21 and 22, there was so much deal flow that even like we hired some national, very reputable property management companies that were successfully operating other deals that we were involved with. But then on that property, they were having turnover, they were promoting people, they were putting a lot of warm bodies, and then they didn't necessarily have the company education or they didn't have the infrastructure within their company to train or to even take the time to train. And so you would find on a property to property level that, okay, maybe they made a good hire and that person was a rock star, or they hired somebody that just couldn't do the job. And so properties suffered for months until you could get a replacement or those kind of things that can really inject some uncertainty and some stuff into deals. But those are the kind of things that I think, exactly to your point, until you've been through it, it's hard to prepare for it. Investors, in many cases, also haven't been exposed to that level of detail. And quite frankly, many of them don't want to be, right? They want to partner with somebody like you that they feel comfortable is doing that level of due diligence and understanding those kind of things, because it is, in many cases, a passive investment. Asset management, operations management, even being part of these partnerships takes a lot of time to do anyway. I guess there's some people that aren't taking that level of detail in there, but it can be tricky. And that's why you want to find, as an investor, really good partners that can communicate that they are doing this level of investigation and exploration and making sure they're finding deals that are, you can't guarantee anything, but are at least set up for the best level of success as possible, given some of the factors that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think what it really comes down to, and while this is a Jake and Gino statement, it's also something that I believe very much in it. And I do spend a lot of time talking with my investors and setting their expectations. But if you buy the property, which obviously means getting a good deal, and then you finance the property right, which in general means using fixed rate debt, as opposed to the floating rate debt that got people in a lot of trouble. And then if you go on to manage it right, which whether some people are doing vertically integrated management, I choose to hire third party management, but then asset manage them to take advantage of the local expertise and to be able to cover more markets. But when you have those three things in place, and then you have, like I said, a realistic expectation timeline of a 5-year exit plan, and you really walk people through, this is the cash flow that you're going to get. This is when we're looking to refinance. This is when we're looking to sell. These are the times this is where you'll get your money back. These are the expected returns, and really educating people on this is our exit cap rate. You can make any deal work if you put your exit cap rate low enough. If you help people to understand and deliver a deal story that makes sense and resonates with people, but that is also conservative and realistic, right? I think one of the big things I tell people is don't just look for the deal with the highest number and the flashiest things, right? That's not always the best, right? The Maserati is always in the shop, right? It might look good, but it's sometimes that Camry or that even what a Lexus, right, is a lot better investment. So when you're looking at things, don't just get caught up in all the return metrics. Because if it's not achievable, then it doesn't matter. And if you've got a solid plan that's executable and realistic and a good team in place, real estate is one of the safest and most fruitful investments that's out there.
Yeah, as you mentioned, shorter shots down the middle of the fairway are a lot of times. You watch these old men play golf, and they're shooting great scores, punching it down the middle of the fairway.
That's a great analogy.
Taking these huge swings every time. Okay, every once in a while, maybe there's a more forgiving setup that you can do that on. But speaking of Fairway Equities, anybody that's interested in learning more about multifamily, real estate, passive investments, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way to reach me is by going to fairwayequities.com. Got several resources, a free ebook, a due diligence checklist. You can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. But if you join our investor community on the website, you'll get access to all of our deals, depending on if it's a 506C deal or a 506B deal. It is always best to book a call and let us learn more about your financial goals and what you're looking to do with real estate, because that way we can help tailor the investments that we bring to you and help you to find that wealth building power and that financial freedom that real estate offers. Yeah, again, fairwayequities.com is the best way to reach me. And I'd love to chat with you and help you out in any way I can with any of your real estate endeavors.
Great. We'll make sure and drop those in the show notes for anybody that wants to follow up in that way.
You want to close
us
out? So much.
I mean, like Mike mentioned before, I'm such a believer that we are in the path of growth, and there are so many tremendous opportunities ahead of us. And we live in a wonderful time of year, and in a great nation. But Brian, we like to end each episode with gratitude. Is there anybody that you would like to shout out to that has been instrumental in your journey and has helped you where you are today?
I'm grateful for my family. Grateful for my family, grateful for Jake and Gino. I do have some mentors. I'm not going to drop their names because there's some pretty high profile individuals, but very grateful for the advice that they've passed along to me and the opportunity to work alongside them and learn from them, and feel like they've really helped me to grow, not only as an investor, but as a person. And I try and bring those values and education to my investors on a daily basis as well.
Yeah, you bring up a great point there. It's fundamental. We've done this a few times in our careers. When we started our land business, when we got into commercial real estate, we made a conscious effort to seek out and find mentors, whether paid or just in a traditional mentorship type arrangement. But it is, whether you're an investor or you want to get more active into the business, I think it is crucial and it's so much more accessible these days in terms of how much, almost too much information, but you can find so many sources to help you accelerate your learning and minimize your mistakes. So yeah, you highlight some really great resources to be grateful for. But we're certainly grateful for you for coming on, sharing your journey, your wisdom, and especially your time with us. And yeah, we wish you success. We'll make sure and get your contact information in the show notes for anybody that wants to reach out. And real estate is a great way to diversify and help build lasting wealth. So thanks for coming on the show, Brian.
Awesome. 100%. Thanks for having me, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
Yes,
take care.
Thank you, Brian.
For those of you joining us today, we hope you enjoyed this time in the Champions Corner as much as we did. Got some awesome takeaways, and most importantly, will take action to continue living your best life and maximizing your potential. Mindset is such an important aspect of life, and when coupled with action, delivers undeniably powerful results.
Please subscribe to the podcast to hear from more great guests and get the latest mindset mastery insights and cash flow matchups.
Again, thank you so much for investing your time with us, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Cash Flow Fight Club podcast.